Okay, well, let's see how this goes. This might be entertaining. All right. Welcome. We are delighted everybody is here tonight. I'm really loud, more than usual. Anyway, welcome everyone, and we are delighted that each one of you are here tonight. We know we are all in our perfect and right place in this very moment. Whether we are here, somewhere else, it's still the right moment. So we welcome you. So I get to introduce our very special guest speaker. I have known Dr. Jim for a long period of time. We won't go into years. He is one of the teachers that helped me move myself to the place I'm at today. In fact, I got the experience of being a spiritual leader for 9 whole months. And I was really happy to hand it over. So, Dr. Jim was one of our pastors, and we prefer spiritual leaders. And we had so many amazing times, events, growth, and development that happened over the, 7? It was 7 years, right? 7 years that he was with us. And even though he's not standing on the platform on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis, the energy and the love that he brought to our center has remained. And simply by looking around the sanctuary, you'll see and feel a lot of his energy, because a lot of the things that are around are due to him. So I'm not going to chatter anymore. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Jim. We are honored and love that you are here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, let's open with a treatment, shall we? Let's take a nice deep breath and let it out with a sigh. And just let anything go that doesn't belong in the room right now. Just release anything that's irritable or agitated or in a hurry or anything like that, and just breathe in a sense of peace and calm and being present. And as we do that, let's know together that we are in the right place at the right time with the right people. That wherever we are, God is. And that we know this truth at the core of our being. We remove all doubt to that aspect. While it is healthy to doubt and question many things, the basic identity of who and what we are is unquestioned. We are divinity expressing, evolving, and living. And when we remember that, truly, our lives work beautifully. So just hold yourself in a space of compassion, a space of love, a space of forgiveness right now. And just see that love, compassion, and forgiveness expanding out into your entire circle of friends and family, acquaintances, colleagues, people you just pass by on the street or who's sitting at the next table at the restaurant. See yourself as being able to extend that feeling of blessing into the world around you, because the world around you is hungering for compassion. It is longing for love. It is seeking forgiveness. So as we do this together tonight, let us also bring the best of ourselves into this moment, to be open, to be receptive, to hear what we need to hear, to see what we need to see, to be who we need to be. There's only one thing happening here, and that is spirit expressing. So I give thanks for this realization in my own life. I give thanks for this realization in yours as it grows and expands and deepens. And I say yes to this good and release this word lovingly into that creative field that we call mind. And we know that it is done unto us as we believe, as we say together, and so it is. Well, greetings from the Rhone Valley of France to the Simi Valley of California. Dorian and I have now been in France full-time for a little over 3 years and part-time for about another half a year before that. And I still don't speak French very well, but I do enjoy a good baguette. And we love the life there. We love the city of Lyon. We love the French culture. We love the food. We love the wine. And we've developed some wonderful friends. Dorian plays her chamber music and classical music with a growing community of musicians that we've met there that are very international. We have people in the group that play regularly that are from Switzerland and Germany and France and the UK and so forth. So it's really a neat group. There's a thing called the American Club of Lyon that I'm a member of, and every Tuesday morning we have a coffee at a cafe, and about anywhere from 7 or 8 to 15 or 20 people gather, and not all of them are American. To be a member, you're supposed to have either been born an American or worked here or gone to school here. But we have a number of French people come to practice their English, and we have one of our favorite members, who isn't an official member, is from Taiwan, of all places, but he comes every week and he knows all the restaurants, so he picks where we're going to go to lunch after the coffee. So it's really an interesting experience in life we have. Now, people have said to me, is the Science of Mind over there? Are there centers over there? And the answer is no. The Science of Mind may be there, but there aren't any centers. The closest center to us is in Geneva, Switzerland, which is a small group, and that's about 2 hours by local train from us, so it's not that far, and I've done some things with them. France is the most secular country on earth. Less than 1% of the population goes to religious services regularly. So you have all these wonderful cathedrals that are all owned by the nation of France, by the way. They're not owned by the church, by the Vatican, or by any of the other denominations, and they are tax supported. And they attract tourists, and it's really kind of a symbiotic relationship. But at Mass time, once or twice we would go to Mass, and you go in, and there's 2 old ladies from the village that are kneeling in the front row, and everybody else is a tourist wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And the total group's about 50. They just don't get many people going to services. So that's just part of the situation there. It's kind of interesting. So I want to talk tonight about what's the purpose of the Science of Mind. Because if you commit to a teaching, or even if you just dabble in it, it's a good idea to have some understanding of what it's about. What is it for? What can it do for you? And what does it require of you? Other than just coming here and, looking for a date, you may be looking into the teaching and things like that. Come on, some of you come here to look for dates. I know that. We used to try to keep those people from being greeters. Yeah, John's waving his hand in the back. Yeah. So anyway, that's another story. But there are these dynamics that go on, and we have, in any spiritual community, you have different levels of, let's say, commitment that show up. Some people come in to dabble, and maybe they go deeper later on. Some people come in and jump right in, and find a real connection and go deep pretty quickly. And some people just sort of stay around the edges, and show up occasionally and like the camaraderie, but it doesn't become necessarily an essential part of their lives. I think the purpose of the teaching will vary to some degree with each of us in terms of what we're seeking and what we find that resonates. For me, it's been a sense of learning how to live a good life. Applying the principles that Ernest Holmes taught, and Ernest Holmes really didn't develop the principles. He was a synthesizer. He took from various ancient wisdom sources and psychology, and put together the principles that we call the science of mind, which have to do with using our psychological mechanism, our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, to create beliefs that allow us to live life more fully, more authentically. And again, the commitment to that can be to find a good parking space at the mall. And once you manifest that, you figure, I'm done. That's all I was looking for. You know, that was good. Or it may be to go through to a deeper level where you really do what I would call a process of developing a sense of radical self-honesty, where you kind of look under all the rocks in the psyche and all the bugs skitter out, and you deal with those issues that maybe have been buried for a long time. Sort of cleaning up the house so that the light can shine more brightly through it. When I was new to the teaching, one of the visiting ministers we had come in at Fort Lauderdale talked about the idea of think of your psyche as a light bulb that has the beautiful light emanating from within it. And over time, the way we live our lives, the way we think our thoughts, the way we live in fear and limitation, we kind of get some dirt that accumulates on the outside of the light bulb. And over time, the light seems to diminish. So he said, a teaching like the science of mind can be your tool to help clean that light bulb of the limiting thoughts, limiting beliefs, the fears, the denials, the things we don't want to look at, so that that light can shine more brightly. To live a good life, whatever that is for you. And for some, it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. There is that individualized aspect. Even though we're all expressing the same spiritual energy, we express it uniquely. For some, that might be a life that's really active. For others, it might be a life that's a little quieter, a little more contemplative. For some, it might mean traveling the world. For others, it might mean staying at home and building a beautiful nest for family and so forth together. So the thing we have to think about is, you know, as my friend Gary Simmons said, who have I come here to be? From the standpoint of my deepest psyche, my soul, what is my soul's agenda? Because the soul, in our parlance, the soul is the deepest part of us that is, deepest part of me that is me. You know, at the very bottom of the psyche, in terms of the deepest part, if you go 1 millimeter below soul, you're in the universal. See? So at some point, and it's not really a linear point, but this is a metaphor that we're thinking in terms of, at some point, the universal individualizes as me and as you, and that's the soul. And the soul has everything we need, everything I need, everything you need to express fully as me and as you. And the idea is to let the soul shine through more clearly. We call that being authentic. But most of our conditioning, or much of our conditioning as we grow up, kind of puts that dirt on the light bulb in a sense. It limits us down. Who are you to think you can do that? Or you're steered into a certain career or a certain way of a path of life because of influences from people that may be well-meaning but may not understand who you are. You're expected to go into the family business, or you're expected to go to this university or go into the military or start work right out of high school because that's what the family has always done. You know, or something like that. Or situations are such that your choices at various key moments in your life are limited by circumstances. So what happens is we end up, those of us that go on a path as a seeker, that, you know, the people that come to a place like this, generally speaking, are trying to undo a lot of that. Now, the problem is a lot of them want to undo it in about 6 weeks. I mean, how long is this going to take? You know, I've been to 3 practitioners and my life still sucks. You know, So there is that kind of egoic need to, look for the most expedient path. What's the easiest way to get there? I don't want, I want to change. I want my life to change, but I don't think I should have to be different. I think I've heard them all by this point, in terms of in class or in counseling or from myself. We get pretty good at snowing ourselves, letting ourselves off the hook. When it might be a time to say, okay, I need to push a little harder on this. It's going to get uncomfortable, but I need to ride through that discomfort, because until I get to the other side of the discomfort, I'm not going to have what I'm seeking. So the purpose of the science of mind, I think, is to give us tools to help us do that, and to give us principles to guide us. And one of the overarching principles is to be as positive as you can, to create a sense of positive expectancy within you. To expect the best, even when it doesn't look like it's showing up. That can be really difficult, Anybody had a rough year? It's okay to raise your hand, it's okay. It's okay to say, you know what, my life sucks at the moment. I'm in pain. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. That vulnerability is an essential part of becoming a mature spiritual person. You see, not to hide the wounds, but to seek to heal them. And healing is usually easier when something is revealed, even though the revealing will tend to be painful. So one thing that Holmes maybe didn't do as thoroughly as he might have is talk about dealing with the pain. Because if a cursory reading of his writing, which is what most people will do, you might read a book or two, you might read a part of the textbook, you might read this thing called You and some articles in the magazine, and you might think, well, all I have to do is deny any problems and think positively, and my life will unfold. I'll be a superstar. I'll live forever. So far, so good. Right? I'm still alive. But there are these nuances, That's the thing about commitment into a teaching, is there's deeper and deeper levels. Every time I read the Science of Mind textbook, I'm reading a different book, not because anything's changed in the book, because different things are resonating with me, hopefully at deeper levels. I just read that one line of that paragraph. When you read the rest of the paragraph, it gets serious. See? What is being called forth from us when we find ourselves in difficult times is something within us already that hasn't been fully expressed. Give me an example. Joseph Campbell talks about the idea of the spiritual warrior. And he says the immature warrior fights external things, the dragons or whatever it might be. The mature warrior recognizes that all the battles are within. So the mature warrior puts down the sword and wields the sword within, cutting away the parts of himself or herself that don't work, opening up what needs to be opened up, being willing to look at the difficulty, the challenges, the fears. Because if we don't, they don't go away. They simply continue to operate within us and our subconscious, which means we're not aware of it, in ways that can lead us into harm. Because here's what I learned by reading a combination of Holmes and Campbell and Carl Jung, the psychologist. Your soul doesn't care about what society wants. Your soul doesn't care whether or not you make a scene. Your soul wants to experience infinity as you, and it won't settle for anything less. So when you say consciously, I'm putting the brakes on here, I can't say that, I can't go into that field. What if I fail? I'll look like a fool. You see, if I'm afraid to look like a fool, my soul will get very upset, very angry, very agitated, and keep prodding me and pushing me. And then what happens is the pain of the prodding and the pushing tends to make me do things like self-medicate, like withdraw, like self-sabotage. You know Emerson's quote, I'm sure you've heard it, of get your bloated nothingness out of the way so that the divine circuits can flow. That's what he means. The bloated nothingness is the nonsense we've accepted as true that we're living from as though it's true, like there's something the matter with you, like you're not good enough, like you're inadequate, like you're not lovable, like you're not worthy. Bullshit. Your soul doesn't believe that. And the energy it takes to keep the soul repressed is what makes us sick. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. You know, Marianne Williamson had that great quote about what we fear is not that we're inadequate. What we fear is that we're so great we won't be able to handle our greatness. They call it the upper limits problem. People can be depressed for 3 weeks and think, well, that's too bad. If things go well 3 days in a row, they're like, uh-oh, something bad's about to happen. Things are going too well. See, where'd that belief come from? These limiting beliefs, we don't even question because they're so ingrained in us. Dr. Tom Costa, who used to have had the church in Palm Desert, wonderful, wonderful minister years ago, people would say to him, I'm on a fixed income, Dr. Tom. He said, who fixed it? He also said people are waiting for their ships to come in. It's come in. It's at the dock. It needs unloading, he would say. And that's the essence. That's another idea, a principle of the teaching, is that we already have within us everything we need to live life fully as the person we are. It's a process of emergence from within, and we often become convinced that what we're supposed to do is find stuff outside. We're supposed to find someone to imitate, or someone to take care of us, or someone to give us something that we lack. But the real journey is to find out how to release that inner splendor, that inner genius, that inner possibility by allowing it to emerge and being willing for others not maybe to accept it very well. I don't want to disappoint someone. I don't want to live my life fully because it might disappoint someone who has a low opinion of me, who I happen to be related to. But that's what we do. I mean, when Dorian and I left and took off, to travel and so forth, which was just a foolish thing to do. You see, there were people that said, aren't you disappointing people? What about your family that you're leaving? What about your parents? What about all your stuff? Oh, you gave your cats away? I could never do that. Then stay home. And be happy staying home, you see? Let me explain why you shouldn't follow your life because of my limitations. It sounds silly when you put it that way, and yet how many of us have found ourselves holding ourselves back from a calling, from an adventure, because we didn't want to disappoint someone who couldn't bear to see us change. And maybe something within us said, Thank God I don't have to take that chance. You see? And our soul said, oh, you're going to suffer for this. I'm going to make you really irritable and unhappy over this one. And you won't necessarily see the association because it'll pop up over here, see, in another part of your life. Ernest Holmes was giving a talk one time in the 50s, and he wore glasses. He put on his glasses to read a quote or scripture or something like that. And after the service, a woman came up and said, well, Dr. Holmes, if we're supposed to be able to heal ourselves, why do you wear glasses? And he looked at her and he said, Madam, I wear my error on my nose. Where do you wear yours? Yeah, you know what? We're not going to be able to treat everything away unless we treat properly and we really believe we can be healed. And that's the catch, right? I'm treating, but, cancer is a big deal. I'm treating, but there's no jobs out there. You see? I treat, and then I question, and then the question is as powerful a treatment, perhaps, as the treatment I did. Now, I'm not trying to say, don't be positive. I'm trying to say understand that your conditioning is not going to easily give up to an affirmative presence. You've been building up this limitation for a long time. It's not going to go away because you learned something new in a 3-day seminar, or because you heard me say something, or you did 2 treatments. Unless those treatments are so deep and so powerful and so radically self-honest that the transformative element is right there. And that can happen and does happen. But it's not an ordinary routine kind of thing because most of us don't think that powerfully. I remember one time I was at a conference and it was a person from New Thought, not religious science, but it could have been. And the person was talking about, well, we should do a treatment because there's a hurricane heading for Jamaica and we should treat that the hurricane go around Jamaica. I said, absolutely, fantastic. I said, tell me something else you've treated about of that magnitude that has actually occurred, that has actually had a demonstration in your favor. And just looked at me and said, are your finances in order? Are your relationships amazing? Are you in really good health? No. But you're going to change a hurricane? You can't change your bank account and you're going to change a hurricane? You see? Now, what would make her think that? Her ego. See? As soon as you say, okay, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to make my life better. I'm going to do some things that are for me, whatever it may be, lifestyle changes. I'm going to commit to a yoga practice. I'm going to commit to meditating. I'm going to commit to doing daily prayer treatments, whatever it is. As soon as you say that, your ego goes, ho, ho, ho. Because your ego is invested in maintaining the status quo within your consciousness, whatever it is. Your ego doesn't care if your life sucks. Your ego cares that your life stays the way it is. And it will release that when it finds out you're really serious about change. But usually that takes repetition, doing the same thing, trying over and over and over. And the bigger the belief system within you that is maybe belief in limitation, the bigger the energy it's going to take to change it. And the reality is that many of us are not willing to put that kind of commitment in on a regular basis because we can't really be guaranteed of the outcome. You can't measure, right? You can't I did 15 treatments about my relationship, so I should be 15 closer? I mean, there's no measurement for that. I don't know what my subconscious belief system is and how it's changed until I see the effect show up in my experience. So I could be like one intention away from tipping it over into a whole new way of being, or I could be 1,000 intentions away. I have no way of knowing as I'm doing the process. That's why we have to learn to commit for ourselves. I was raised Catholic, as some of you know, and there's lots of really funny stories about that. But one thing I will say is that I was growing up and going to Catholic school and going to Mass. I really thought it was hard to be a good Catholic. And it is. It is. To obey all those commandments, right? To not have any impure thoughts. Some of you are having one now. Right? And so on and so on and so on. And I would just think as a young boy, my God, how do you get to be holy? I have no idea. It must, I would just, it was like watching someone that could like run 3 times as fast as me. I don't know how they do that. I can't imagine that in myself. So I really struggled with that. And I left the church as soon as I graduated high school. And I became a knife and fork Christian for a few decades, where I went to church suppers and church breakfasts because they were usually free and they had really good food. And I was in the countryside, where those things tend to happen. And I came into the science of mind, and I was struck instantly by the ideas of it. I loved the ideas and the sort of the style of my teacher. I really resonated with. I liked the people that were there, But it was a while before I really began to do some deep thinking about what the philosophy was about, what the teaching meant, what its purpose would be for me. And as I began to think seriously about that and look at what would be required to make a transformational change in my understanding of myself and my relationship to my spiritual nature, I came to see that it was going to be as hard or harder than being a good Catholic. Because I can't just say I'm a religious scientist and I do 2 treatments a day and not be realizing my greater nature and say that I'm doing it. Joseph Campbell says, you know when you're on the beam and you know when you're off the beam. There's a little gyroscope in you, a sort of an emotional, spiritual gyroscope that you know when you're BSing yourself, and you know when you're slacking off, and you know when you're playing under your capacity. And we're all going to do that from time to time. It's not that you never do that. But if that's what you're doing most of the time and you're wondering why your life doesn't work, maybe there's an answer in there, you see. And it comes back to that basic idea of, am I worthy? Am I worthy of having my life work all the time? Edwene Gaines, who's been here a few times, she teaches prosperity. She goes, one of the biggest problems people have is accepting their own worth. Because we've been told in so many ways, direct and indirect, that our worth is questionable at best. Many religions teach us you're a miserable sinner. You see? And, I was labeled many negative things as a young boy, as young boys will be. Because if you act like a young boy in our culture, you're labeled as a disturbing element. Sit down and sit still. Impossible. See? And young girls are given a message that you have to be good, and it's impossible for you to be as good as you have to be. So we grow up, in a sense, as damaged goods. We're like the pieces of fruit they set over in the side at the market. In France, they have ugly fruit bins. or everything's like half price because they're not supposed to throw anything away. See? And sometimes we feel like we're in that ugly fruit bin, and we feel like we deserve to be there. And then we say, well, what I'm going to do is treat my way out of it. And what are you treating for? Well, a parking space. Maybe you should be treated, just do the first 2 steps. God is, I am. Don't worry about what follows for a while. Just focus on really deep thought and contemplation. The first step of treatment. What spirit is to you. What is spirit? The infinite mind, the infinite heart, the presence of spirit that animates everything. And what is my relationship to it? I am it expressing in an individualized way as me. So how can I not be worthy? And the reason Holmes put those 2 steps in the front was because once you accept that consciousness, you can manifest pretty much anything. And until you accept it, whatever you manifest will lead you into trouble, even if it's what you think you want. Because the soul will not accept you being a fraud. It's a tough lesson. And what we see in our teaching often are people who aren't able to confront that. So they turn to what I call, and I don't just call it, but a lot of people call it magical thinking. Oh, Spirit must have wanted me to get into that car wreck. You know. No, Spirit didn't know you were going to have the wreck till you had it. There isn't a plan. We're making it up as we go along from a psychic perspective. And when a lot of my psychic energy, my psychological energy is going into unconsciously depressing my soul's agenda, my life becomes a mess. Even if I'm successful. Even if I have the right wife and the right car and the right house and the right job. How many people do we see that have climbed the mountain of success and their lives are a mess, or they commit suicide? Or they're nasty. They're unable to accept their good because a part of them knows they are fraudulent in their relationship with themselves. Your soul doesn't want you to have the big house. Your soul wants you to be fully realized. That may involve the big house, but that's not the goal. What it involves is you expressing in a way where your life feels like you're in harmony. It's like a symphony orchestra where everybody's playing on key. And when things do go wrong, you experience them and respond to them as a healthy self. Because being spiritually realized doesn't mean you don't have problems. It means you have bigger problems. But you're prepared for them. You can take on a larger sphere of issues. I do a class, some of you know, I do a class, I'm not doing it this coming year, but for the last 3 years I've done a class that starts in September and runs until June, meets weekly on Zoom and with a group, and then once a month there's a one-on-one with each student for an hour with me, and then we end with a week in France, as one does. But what I'll say about that, and I've had people in that course who have been in Science of Mind for years, I've had people in that course that have never opened a book on New Thought. And what I would say is that what I see in that class is once you engage in something like that, and it's not cheap, because I value myself, is that people engage. They don't want to waste their money. They don't want to waste their time. And what we see is we see change happen, and it's 9 months long, so you have time to get into new habits. You see. And it's a deep dive into what I call shadow stuff, into soul's agenda, into, what do I really want to do with the rest of my life? No matter no matter what my starting point is, where do I want to go from here? And what am I going to bring to that experience? And what commitment will I make to myself in the process? You see, these are deep, big questions that we should be asking ourselves on a regular basis. No matter our age, no matter what we do or who we, no matter. We should be able to question everything and hold nothing so sacred that it can't be explored or examined. And that means you're going to be uncomfortable a lot of the time. And again, there's a mistaken idea that spirituality should bring us comfort. No. Spirituality should bring us great discomfort. Because if we're comfortable, it means we're satisfied with who we are at that moment, who we're being at that moment. And that's where we fall into trouble. The other place we fall into trouble is when we say, I'm being controlled by what's happening around me. Now, I will say this, there is some truth to that. If you were born in certain circumstances in a certain time, you were subject to those circumstances in that time. If you were born a Jew in Germany in the early part of the 20th century, your life was going to be affected by that reality. Can my spirituality protect me from this pandemic? Yeah, we can. I believe that. But I wear a mask, and I'm vaccinated. Because I'm not perfectly sure that I have achieved that level of spiritual realization, that I am perfectly protected from whatever the hell this virus is. And I recognize that I can be contributing to issues for other people. And I realize that it would be arrogant of me to assume without evidence that I'm immune. And I also look at, I look at people who are saying things, I've seen some people, not just anti-vaxxers, but people are saying if you're spiritual enough, you don't need the vaccine, which may be true. And probably is true. But again, it's like that person that was going to stop the hurricane from hitting Jamaica. It did hit Jamaica, by the way. It was her own fear of inadequacy that projected into grandiosity. And a number of the people I see saying, don't worry about the pandemic because of you're spiritually real, or I'm spiritually realized, usually speaking for themselves, they sound like they're being grandiose quite often to me. And grandiosity comes from fear and a sense of inadequacy. And if I'm proclaiming something amazing from a sense of inadequacy, I may be setting myself up for a negative experience. But we all have to make our own choices about that, see? But the question to me is not whether or not you can be spiritually immune from the virus. The question to me is, are you going to be compassionate about the virus? Are you going to care about other people who may not be as realized as you? Are you going to be an example to those who may need examples before they will follow the guidelines that seem to make the most sense. And I realize there's conversations about that. Compassion has to be the goal of spirituality, or it's not spirituality. Compassion is a step above empathy. There's antipathy, which is where you don't like something or someone. There's apathy, where you don't care. Right? There's sympathy, which is where you're sorry someone's having a rough time, but you're happy that you're not. You don't say the second part. So sympathy, although it's a positive thing, is also a thing of kind of separation. There's empathy, and two kinds of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, where I can understand not only what you're thinking, I can understand what you're feeling from a cognitive standpoint. And there's emotional empathy. There are people, they're often called empaths, who feel what other people are feeling. The problem with some empaths is that they don't have enough of their own inner strength to be able to set kind of internal boundaries so that they're not swept away into negativity or grandiosity of the people around them. Compassion builds on empathy, and it takes two things, as my opinion. Courage, because compassion requires radical self-honesty, and humility. Humility is simply to live in truth. People think to be humble is to put yourself down. No, to be humble is to be honest. See? The honest truth is, you're a divine being having a human experience. That's being humble. It's also being humble to say, but I'm not doing a good job of it this week. See? So you combine empathy, humility, and courage, and you're able to feel into a situation where compassion is a sense of oneness with the other. Not I'm here, you're there, you need help. I'm here, you're there, I'm there too. So we're willing to be present for someone. We're willing to set aside maybe our own agenda to help another. Not even as a decision. It's like an automatic thing when compassion is developed well. Of course I'm there for you. This is something I need to work on in my own life. I fully admit that. But I'm clear about it being something I'm consciously and with effort working toward to get better at every day. And it doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you don't get to enjoy yourself because everybody's so needy. That's sympathy. It means that something within you develops to a point where you make yourself and available to others when it is yours to do. So I don't take on every problem. You burn out pretty quickly doing that, right? Go on Facebook to say, nobody's talking about this. Why aren't you doing anything about this? Because I'm working on these other 75 things, right? Being able to discern what is mine to do comes from a realization of both courage and humility. You know what? I'm not the person to deal with that issue. I don't have any interest in it. I don't have any skills in it. And I have other things I'm doing. That's being compassionate. Being compassionate isn't always being kind. It's kindness when appropriate. Sometimes kindness doesn't work. Have you noticed? Kindness usually doesn't get people into rehab. Being radically honest is what does, and laying down firm and healthy boundaries. That's what often the empath has difficulty doing, is having a firm and healthy boundary around the emotions or toward the emotions that are around them. And they can become incapacitated. So how do we find that balance? How do we, if you tend to be the kind of person that does have that kind of empathy, that emotional connection, that's a fertile area to work on so that you can be in strength in that position. It brings to mind the biblical story of casting pearls before swine. Now, that just doesn't mean that people are swine certain people are swine. It means certain things are not yours to do. And if you give your genius to something that isn't going to be receptive to it, you're wasting your own energy. Yet our ego itself often wants us, if everyone doesn't believe the way I do, we're all doomed, so I have to convince everyone. And you open Facebook and go to work. And someone says, God, I saw your meme and my life changed. It doesn't mean you don't post a meme. It means don't have unreasonable expectations. Don't be so grandiose. See, be humble. I'll do what I can. I will let people know what I think, but I'm not going to insist they agree with me because I don't have that much energy. Getting people to agree with you usually involves some form of totalitarianism. You have to have a big enough stick, you see, and that's not how I want to approach life. So sometimes the wisest thing I can do is create some space and distance between me and those people. And that can be painful. And that can feel like you failed. So the idea of being spiritually mature, spiritually realized, the purpose of the science of mind is to learn that, to do that. And we do it how? As Ernest Holmes said, over and over and over. Spirit can only do for you what it can do through you. Treat and move your feet. Pray and act. We have to be the expression of who we are. The soul wants to express. I spoke down at Palm Desert Sunday, and some of you may have seen the video, and one of the things that they were doing at that center, they had a monthly theme about being audacious. And there's an affirmation, the theme was dare, and the affirmation was, I am always my audacious self. And they did that affirmation right before I spoke. And I got up, and the first thing I said was, I don't like that affirmation. And you're just like, because they'd been saying it for 4 weeks. And I said, think about this. To be audacious is to express who you think you are. A lot of people out there are being audacious and doing a lot of damage, spreading a lot of hate and fear and violence. I talked about, you may have seen the video that went viral over the weekend of the guy in the Miami airport who was punching people and knocking over the stanchions, probably about a mask issue, or something big like that. He was being audacious. The Dalai Lama is audacious. See, different energy, right? So I want to be my authentic self, and I want to express that, but first I got to figure out who that is. And for me, I'll just say for me, as I began to discover that idea of sort of releasing my soul from the bonds I'd created through my conditioning, that a lot of my conditioning was filled with anger. And when you tell people, be yourself and just say whatever you want, how often does anger come out as the first thing? Oh, now I'll get them, right? Or somebody gets promoted, oh boy, are you in trouble, right? Because they got all this anger they've been building up over time. being audacious. Before I be audacious, I need to do the inner work and clean that up. How do I do that? I treat, I contemplate, I read stuff that can help me to find my way and to greater understanding of that kind of thing. I try to hang around people that seem to be doing it well. I meditate. I give of service where possible. I try to be really conscious as I go along of where maybe I need a boundary here. This seems to be a relationship that isn't working. So it's a number of things we do, and each person will do it in their own way to some degree. Sometimes you need to go to help. I went to therapy to help me through that process. And it was very helpful. It was painful, but helpful. So a lot of what happens within this teaching, and I'm sure within any spiritual teaching, is the ego wants a pain-free experience of change that doesn't feel uncomfortable. Let's just affirm our way to transformation. And until you become receptive to the affirmations within in a true way, that's hard to do. So the teaching and other, what I call ancillary aspects of wisdom, like Jungian psychology, I think I found very helpful, and other areas, and you find your own. Maybe just be going into nature and communing with nature. It might be going to find an appreciation of art and how art can speak to you. It might be being of service in ways that you haven't been of service before. It might be something as simple as next time you see your family, give them the gift of your best self. See how surprised they are. Well, you seem happy. What's going on with you? I'm becoming happy. Why? See? You'll get the feedback if you are willing to show them the change. So the purpose of this teaching is to live a good life, and the purpose of this teaching is to learn how to die. An older man told me that during my first year of class in Fort Lauderdale. We were on a break, and he was about, I guess he was 85 or 90, something like that. And he was taking Science of Mind 1 again. And we were on break, and he said, "You know what the Science of Mind's about?" And I said, "Tell me." "It's about learning how to die." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "When you learn how to live, you'll know how to die. If you don't learn how to live, death is going to be a struggle." And I never forgot that. And in the, 30-some years since, it seems like about 2 years ago, but it's been 30, that I've seen that become more and more true. When you feel like you've lived a full life and death comes, as it will, you're ready. It may not be the most convenient time, but in essence, you're ready. We have been doing some elder care things with parents and my aunt and uncle in Maryland. I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of them, and interestingly enough, there was a similar theme as they sort of drift into a little bit of senility, a little bit of being frail and unable to do what they were doing. There was a sense of peace. And some of the people around them were not happy with that. You see? Well, out of care, out of fear, it's understandable. Yeah, it's not so bad not to remember. It's not so bad to sleep 3/4 of the day sometimes. It's a transition, and each of us will do that differently. but they weren't fighting it. They weren't feeling cheated. They weren't feeling like they missed something because these people have lived full lives. You see? So my goal, when I hit 70 last month, actually didn't hit it, I ran right through it. And I thought maybe it's time to set some goals. And you know, this was really a clarifying process, because working with my students, I've been doing this for a while, and it was really the goal. It's very simple. I want to live a good life. I want to enjoy life. I want to be around people that I love and cherish. I want to eat good food. I want to the degree that that's possible to do reasonably, recognizing the situation that we have created on this planet. So being responsible too, but also a life of contribution. And when I live a good life, I'm more capable of contributing. That's one thing I find. I'm more disposed to contribute. I'm happier to help where I can. I'm growing better at seeing where I can help and where I should probably leave that to someone else. And I'm enjoying life in each moment more and more. Again, Joseph Campbell talked about living joyfully in the sorrows of the world. He said, you can't cure the world of sorrows, but you can learn to live in joy. And by that he meant simply the fullest realization of who you are. The idea of following your bliss is finding that soul's agenda and living it. And when you do, you will find that you are naturally inclined and drawn to what is yours to do. And you're not forcing yourself on people. Or you're not sitting back afraid to act. And I'll just close with this. One time we had a conference down in San Diego. Some of you may have gone to that. And Byron Katie, the author, and was the guest speaker for like a whole day. And she had a sofa up on the stage, and she'd sit on the sofa, and everybody in the audience had to fill out this worksheet. It's called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. And you pick something that you're pissed off about, or upset about, or feeling betrayed about. And you write it, and there's a bunch of questions and stuff, which I won't go into. And you go up, and she would call certain people up who volunteers and say, and she'd go through your sheet with you, and she would do the work, which is a series of questions. And this one young woman went up who was one of the musicians for the conference. And she went up, and her Judge Your Neighbor worksheet was about that people weren't responding to her music the way they should. So see, this is one of our problems, is we should on people. And, whoops. They said, so Byron Katie says, why should they pay attention to your music? Is that true? Yes, it's true. Are you absolutely sure that's true? Yes. What would it look like if you didn't feel this way, or if this wasn't a problem? And she talked, and the young woman just did not respond in the way that the thing was supposed to go. She stuck to her guns, right? And as she's walking off the stage, she's turning around saying, my music is healing, and without my music, people won't heal. And Byron Katie said, well, that's arrogant, A. And B, why should we allow you to inflict your music on us when it's obviously you that needs it more than we do? That's compassion. That's compassion. Rather, okay, honey, go ahead and play for 6 hours, and we'll all pretend to clap. That's sympathy. See the difference? And that young woman got something to think about. Now, she may not have changed because of it, but she was given a great opportunity to really look at herself in a new way. And so often when we hear that pain, that thing that causes us pain that's true, We just want to shut it off. We just want to, so we self-medicate. Give me a martini or give me whatever, And let me ignore it. Let me pretend it didn't happen. And let me figure out why the person that said it is wrong. And let me get other people to agree. You see. But where does that get us? Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home. What would humanity be like if we understood that? I love you. Thank you.